Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we have the privilege to interview Phil Strazzulla. Phil is an entrepreneur and founder of Select Software Reviews, a website dedicated to helping HR and recruiting teams find and buy the right software through in-depth expert advice. Phil started his career in venture capital before getting his MBA at Harvard Business School. We are really excited to get Phil's story and learn more about his company. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks, guys. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So first things first, let's hear a little bit of background in your life story and what led you to founding Select Software Reviews.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the Boston suburbs. As a kid, I was always interested in entrepreneurship. I had, my lawn mowing company and stuff like that. I was also interested in the stock market. So I started investing in the stock market when I was 12. My brother and I begged my parents to take us to Fidelity, and then they finally did. It was I think we opened the accounts in 97. So from 95 on, we were sort of like, can we do this? Can we do this? It was right after the Netscape IPO. The market was too hot. My parents thought we'd get burned investing into a bubble. And so didn't want to take us down there, but eventually relented. And ever since then, we've sort of been interested, both of us, in investing. That's what my brother does primarily as his profession. And I did it for a while as well. After college, studied finance, worked at a venture capital firm doing early stage software investing at a really big VC. And then I always had the entrepreneurial itch. I'd read the Paul Graham essays and have to stop myself because it made me want to quit so badly and just start something. And so I always had that fire, a million ideas. I still have, a folder in my Gmail that's like business ideas, and probably once a week I add something to it. When I was at business school, I finally sort of got the guts to start something. I started teaching myself how to program, working on a lot of different projects. One of those turned into a thing that could eventually be a business. And I convinced a friend of mine to partner up with me, and we built this small HR software business that about 2 or 3 years ago, I hired somebody to sort of replace me on a day-to-day basis as a general manager. And so I had this extra time, wanted to start another business, still had that fire. I love to learn, I love to teach, and a gap in the market that I saw is buying HR tools is really hard. There are hundreds of vendors for every single thing that HR teams need to do, from payroll through hiring, through leveraging artificial intelligence to engage team members, remote work, et cetera. And I looked at businesses like NerdWallet and Wirecutter and thought, hey, what if we did something like that for this space to really help people in an unbiased kind of journalistic way figure out what's the right solution for them. And so that's what I spend the majority of my time on, in addition to spending probably like 10 to 20% of my time, depending on the week, on investing. So I invest in a bunch of search funds. I do some secondary investing into late stage technology companies where I find employees and I'm like, hey, I'll give you some money for stock that's not going to be liquid for a really long time. So you can start a 529 for your kids or find investment property or whatever. So I do a bunch of random stuff like that as well. But my primary focus is Select Software.
Awesome. So Phil, thanks for sharing your story. So taking a look back, you mentioned earlier, you said you have had the entrepreneur itch for a while. Can you share did you do anything like Kool-Aid stands or anything when you were a kid?
I had a lawn mowing business, and I've been journaling since I was a kid, and I have sketches in my journals of I remember this one. It's really stupid, and this is what you do as a fourth grader. This camera system in a store that if it saw somebody stealing something would shoot them with a laser. And I was like, I should invent that, and that'll solve theft. And I remember my dad being very critical of this idea and not really understanding why you can't just kill somebody in the store for maybe stealing something that the camera decides you've stolen. But yeah, I guess I've just always had these sorts of ideas. As a kid, I had my own lawn mowing business, and then I was really into money, collecting money. When I was in first grade, the interest rates for a savings account were 5%. And I remember this idea of for every $100 you have, you just get paid $5 a year. That's crazy. And so I started trying to trade baseball cards and make money that way, or collecting coins, collecting stamps, all these little tiny things to try to like build that savings amount. And then eventually I took that money and I put it in the stock market. And so it just sort of compounded a little bit over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the lawn mowing story. The number of entrepreneurs that we've had on here that either had a lemonade stand or a lawn mowing business is incredible. And I have a son, he's 20 months old, but I will definitely be encouraging him to get into at least one of those for sure. So very nice, very nice. So obviously the title of the show is Firing the Man, and it's all about quitting your job and working for yourself. So let's dive into that a little bit. So you were working for a big VC firm, and then you went to business school. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And then, I would imagine towards the end of business school, you had to make a decision. Either I go back and work for the man or run with my idea. So let's dive in there. What were some of the, what was going through your mind as you were evaluating that? What were some of your fears?
Yeah, it's even honestly like before you get to business school, you have to make that decision because you start getting emails from Google, McKinsey, all these amazing companies, and they're like, hey, like, we're going to do a steak dinner tomorrow night. Like, you should come and, schmooze with us. And we're going to the Red Sox game. And, all these, there's basically like a really sophisticated mechanism to get people to do a summer internship, which you commit to really early on in your 2-year program. And then after that internship that you have probably a pretty good time with, they say, hey, we're going to pay for your business school, which is like a ton of money. And we're going to give you a huge signing bonus that we're going to wire to you like next week if you sign on the dotted line. And those signing bonuses can be like 50 grand, 100 grand, like really meaningful amount of money. And so from the get-go, I was like, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Like, I'm not going to update my resume. I'm not going to respond to any of these emails because it's a slippery slope and you can slowly start to get used to the idea of, well, I'll just go do this for another couple of years, make a little bit more pocket money, and eventually I'll start this thing. But it becomes harder and harder, right? Golden handcuffs, all that stuff. And so I sort of went into it being like, just try as hard as you can to stick to what you want to do and just take it week by week. And, don't think I got to say no for 2 years, and don't look at what your peers are doing because that's going to freak you out too. That was my strategy.
Okay. Was that informed? You had mentioned a brother, older brother or younger brother?
Younger brother.
Younger brother. So that decision to kind of ignore the McKinseys of the world, which I'm sure is a very daunting task, right? What led you to that? I mean, was it a mentor? Was it a gut feeling? What led you to that?
So I had an amazing job before business school. It was so interesting. Like every single day I'd talk to 5 different entrepreneurs. I got to work with incredibly smart people. And it was just like, I was like, this is sort of like the peak if you're going to have a job. And even in that job, I still had this like burning fire in me that was like, start something, build something, work on this thing, do something creative, etc. And so I knew that if I went back to a job, even if it was an amazing job, I would still have that. I would still feel unfulfilled. And because I'd written that down in my journal, I would just go back to that. And it's like, that's the end result. And so you can go and like do this McKinsey thing, you'll make a lot of money and you'll have a lot of prestige and you'll be on a great career path, but you'll still feel unfulfilled. So just don't do that. And don't allow yourself to go down that path of convincing yourself to do that by starting day one, going to a dinner with one of the partners or something like that.
Now, Phil, yeah, I really like that. Early on, you kind of journaled it down and then you just kind of stuck to your guns. You're like, you know what, I'm just going to do this and not deviate from that. Now, thinking back on that from where you are now, any regrets or are you extremely happy with your choice?
Things are never, especially in the entrepreneurial path, things are so up and down. And for a long time, my first business really, really struggled. And I was absurdly burnt out on it, doing sales that was just a complete slog, trying to build really an under-resourced company that for various reasons we decided to bootstrap and not raise capital for. And so for a while I was like, why didn't I just join one of these companies? And of course, like in business school, you're in these sections of 90 people. And so within your cohort of 90 people, you're going to have a couple of people, even 3 or 4 years out of college, that like join the right company and their equity is worth $40 million. And you're going to have somebody that joined a VC firm and they made a really good investment and they've got $30 million of carry coming their way. And I'm just like, why did I decide to do this thing that was like so hard with such a low probability? Like, that was so stupid. I should have gotten paid to learn and gone and done this other thing. You know, especially like visiting like companies' offices, and I'd be like, wow, this is so nice. And they have like health insurance and, you know, free lunch and like all this stuff. But at the end of the day, you know, now I'm 7 years out of business school. I think that the lessons that I learned in the first 3 or 4 years, even though they were super hard, it was sort of like training with weights on. And I learned a heck of a lot more than I would have being a person at a company, even an early stage company, or going back and working in venture capital. And I'm now able to sort of reap the rewards of those learnings on a day-to-day basis with my current business. And so I would say like there probably was like a 6 months time when I was just like, that was like so dumb. I wasted all this time. You know, I'm so much more poor than I should be. I've skipped like so many friends' weddings because I couldn't afford to go to them and blah, blah, blah. But at this point, you know, a couple years later, I'm like, it was a really hard path, but it was the right one for me.
And last question to round out the MBA discussion is, and actually I was talking to my little brother about this today. He would like to own his own business and was talking to me about getting an MBA. And I think it was Tim Ferriss who created like a synthetic MBA program for himself, where he went out, he started a company, and he was going to take 2 years just to learn. And I'm curious, you know, knowing what you know now, would you have gone to business school, or would have you started this company a couple years earlier? What would be your general advice on someone considering business school to help them pivot in their career?
I would still definitely do the MBA program. And that is because I went to arguably the best program in the world. And so, you know, I live in Boston. So like going to Harvard doesn't really mean anything. You know, like nobody really cares. Like there's so many different alumni here. But like the further I found that you get away from Cambridge, the more people care about it. And so that really helps to do business development, to hire, to do all these things. It greases the wheels a lot, especially when you do business internationally. I learned a ton. I met people that I do business with that are really good friends of mine, lifelong friends. And I think most importantly, like I just had 2 of the best years of my life. You travel, you're with these amazingly interesting people who are outgoing, who are like, hey, let's go surfing in Costa Rica. Let's go to the Amazon. Let's go to Galapagos. Let's go backpack through Europe. Let's, you know, do all these things. And so I wouldn't replace that for the world. I think that if you're not looking at a top 5 or top 10 MBA program, then it becomes a lot more challenging because it's so much money. And if you're going to start a business, I would say probably, you know, even going to like a really good school like University of Michigan, probably not the best use of your money and time. All that stuff you can learn through reading, through experience. And I like the Tim Ferriss thing. The guy actually that we hired as a GM for my previous business, he was like a huge Tim Ferriss guy. And that was like one of his first things is like, because I think Tim Ferriss like went and like learned like Muay Thai and like learned how to be a chef and like all this stuff. And he's like, I only spent, you know, 10 grand or whatever it was. And I learned like so much more. And I completely agree with that. And I'm sure that he probably learned a lot more than you would at any MBA program. I also think Tim Ferriss is a bit of an outlier. Most people probably aren't going to do that. You know, like you're going to sit on your couch and play video games or something. But it's not an easy decision. I think if you get into Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, do that. If you don't, then you really got to think about it, and the answer is probably don't do it.
Yeah, I think if the concept of an MBA was a stock, I would short it right now. I think especially in the internet age with, you know, everything being available online, it is becoming less and less valuable. But you're absolutely right. That top 5, like that, and that's an important caveat I need to follow up with my brother on is you know, that top 5, top 10 program. I would definitely agree with you. So
I was just going to say, like, literally, it's like you can work out with Navy SEALs. You can, you know, learn how to debate with people who won national championships. You can hang out with people who are the heirs to, the biggest brands in the world. All of these things are like, that's like a week in your MBA program, because this classmate was a SEAL. This one won the national championship. This one's the heir to Louis Vuitton. Like, like that's just like, that's a normal week, which is kind of insane. And like, you're not going to do that anywhere else.
So Phil, that was a great perspective on, MBA programs versus, not, and yeah, it's pretty interesting. I want to pivot a little bit and kind of hit on some of your strong points. The audience that David and I for our Fire and Demand podcast mostly is solopreneurs, entrepreneurs of small businesses working remote. And so can you give some tips on kind of like this work-life balance in remote work? And it probably relates to most people nowadays.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I started working remotely like just before the pandemic, and I tried to do it a couple times previously and totally failed. And it was because I didn't have the right physical space, and I also hadn't really trained myself to just like focus and get into routines. And so how I actually got successful with it was I started having a routine in the morning that sort of trained my brain into saying like, hey, we're going into work mode now. We're having a cup of coffee, we're having our yogurt, we're sitting down in this chair in this room. This is the time that we really focus. And then I was having a ton of trouble focusing at home. I'd always like procrastinate, like, oh, I got to do the dishes, I got to take a nap, I got to work out. And so I found this app called FocusMate, which is really amazing. And what it does, it's kind of weird, but it pairs you up with another person working remotely for 45 minutes. And at the beginning of it, you're like, hey, I'm Phil, and here's what I'm going to get done in this 45 minutes. And you put it in the chat, like, I'm going to write, like this blog post and like send this email, whatever. And they do the same thing. A lot of times, like a grad student, a lot of computer programmers, etc. And you just work, and like they're on video, they're on microphone, like there's like some sort of like social contract with this person that like we've been evolved to like make these social contracts with each other and do what we're going to do. Otherwise, like the rest of the people in our tribe won't trust us. And they'll make us like leave the cave or whatever. And it works. And you just like you're just working so hard. And then at the end of the thing, for the last like 30 seconds, it's like, hey, what'd you get done? And it's like, well, I wrote the blog post, I didn't write the email, but I did this or whatever, right? And then you take a 10-minute break, and then you do another FocusMate. And you just like, those are your most productive 45 minutes like you've ever had in your entire life. And after doing probably, 200 or 300 of those, maybe more than that, I just sort of got in the habit of like, okay, when I'm here, like I'm working really hard, I'm focused, I'm not like going on YouTube, I'm not doing the dishes, I'm just like getting stuff done. And that helped me to figure out how to work from home for me. And then the amazing thing is obviously, you have all this flexibility. So you can go to the gym if you want, and you can start regimenting yourself there. I like to block all the time on my calendar up until about 11 a.m. Eastern time so that I can get 2 or 3 things done. I've got this little, journal that I write down one thing I'm grateful for, and then 2 things I want to get done in the morning. And then I try to get those 2 things done, go to the gym, do some meetings, make dinner, and sort of transition out of work mode for the rest of the evening. I'm also a big fan of that book, Deep Work by Cal Newport. There's a lot of tactics that I've kind of stolen from there. But that was sort of my journey. And now I love working from home. I probably will try to find an office when we have a kid in 5 months for a little bit so I can, get some stuff done when the baby's crying. But otherwise, I sort of see myself working from home for a really long time.
So accountability partner, that's kind of sounds like what FocusMe is, right? You have an accountability partner. That's huge. Yep. And then, so for you, you do your most productivity time is in the morning, right? That's when you feel fresh and you're alert. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So great tips. Sorry, David, I cut you off.
And you're spot on with having a secondary workspace when you have a newborn. I went through that. Noise canceling headphones do a lot for that. But I'm actually in the process of building a new office that sits 100 yards from my house. I can walk down there, but it'll be nice. Away from the house. And I think my spouse will appreciate not feeling like the house has to be quiet all the time. So anyway, I was smiling when you were saying that because I've been talking to Ken about that quite a bit lately. So Anyway, let's dive into burnout when you're working from home. I find that you know if your office is 30 feet from where you sleep, sometimes it's easy to feel like you're never getting out of this cycle of work, sleep, work, sleep. You know what I mean. So let's chat a little bit about burnout.
Yeah, it's and there's been so much interesting research. Obviously, I'm in the HR space, so I stay on top of this stuff around, work days getting longer, people spending more time on emails late at night, early in the morning. And I think what's happening is people's work brains, all the cortisol, the adrenaline, et cetera, is just like persisting throughout your entire life, your waking life, and maybe your sleeping life as well. And if you don't relax, if you don't sort of get into those other states, then it's really easy for that to compound and eventually for you to sort of cycle into burnout. I think I read a stat that 89% of employees last year felt burnout at some point. And I think for entrepreneurs, it's probably even higher because we're always on anyways. And so the book Deep Work actually talks about this a lot, which is really cool. Essentially, like, it's really important for you to take breaks, for you to work really intensely, and then to like basically be bored and like let your brain travel around. Like I found one thing that really helps me is I used to like be on Twitter when I'm like brushing my teeth or something, and your brain just needs to be bored and like not think about anything and not have all these like rushes of dopamine like hitting you all the time. And so allowing yourself to just do nothing is really, really important. And I think also allowing yourself to, when you are the most productive, to really get things done that are hard, that make progress, that's not just, answering emails and things like that, is really important. Scheduling emails is something I've found to be effective. I don't have my inbox open all the time. My phone's always on do not disturb. One of my friends actually just texted me, "Why does your phone always go to voicemail?" It's so annoying. And I'm like, yeah, it's on do not disturb. Like, when I'm like, doing something that I need to concentrate on that takes me 10 minutes to get into the zone before I start hitting max productivity, I don't want you to call me unless it's super, super important. I don't want to be distracted. So all these little things, and there's a lot of literature out there from companies like Zapier, GitLab that have been remote first. Acceleration Partners, the guy that owns that, just wrote a book about managing remote teams. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's applicable if you manage a team or if you're just doing it yourself.
One follow-up question. Have you ever done a sensory deprivation tank or a float tank?
I haven't. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I was actually on a vacation, a beach vacation, and I was like in the water, just sort of like floating like that. And I was wondering if that was what it was like. But of course, I can't hold my breath for that long either. But yeah, why do you ask?
So you were talking about like entrepreneurs needing to like unwind, and I am wound up pretty tightly, but I have found that to be the single most effective thing to helping me unwind. And so it's been well documented on this podcast. I'm a huge fan of them, Ken as well. And so anyway, if you're ever looking to unwind or get some quiet time, that would be my pro tip is give one of those a chance, because they've been incredibly helpful for me.
I'll give it a shot. Thanks for putting that on my radar.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm like you. I have my phone's right here, but it's on D&D. I never turn it on, and so it's on D&D. That I have like 7 people or 8 people maybe in my list that can get through, and so I started that last year. That has been probably the single biggest help for me increasing my productivity. You mentioned email. That's something I struggle with is having my inbox open all day. How do you manage that? Like, can you give some tips on email?
Sure. So I think your browser, which I do most of my work out of my browser, is really important. If I've got a lot of Chrome tabs open, I find that my memory is worse, my concentration is worse. If my email is even open, like if I can see my email, like Google spent God knows how much money like figuring out like how to make their tab in Chrome like grab your attention, and for you to be like, there's an email, like I need to go answer that thing, and that's why even actually on my phone, I've programmed it so that I can triple click the power button and it'll turn it to black and white. because I found that actually will significantly decrease the amount of like response that my body has to anything that's on my phone if things aren't in color, because all these colors are designed to like make us want to do stuff. And so I think just not having it open, you can set the expectation with your team and the people that you work with as contractors, et cetera, that, hey, I check my email at 11 a.m., 2 p.m., and then 5 p.m., something like that. Or if you email me, I'll get back to you within 24 hours. The interesting thing is, unless you work at McKinsey, where you've got a client that's paying you $3 million a year to do something for them, nobody cares if you email them, 7 hours later. It's just like this weird work culture where everybody wants to be super responsive and like prove that they're working, but nobody cares. And all you're doing is decreasing your productivity and decreasing your happiness and increasing your burnout. So I would just close it as hard as it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that. I'm such a Chrome junkie that I have folders on there of like all my projects and businesses that I own, and they're all in folders. And so when I want to switch between businesses, I open an entire folder and it has like 15 or 20 tabs. And so I think I'm gonna go to like just doing email like twice a day. I know David does something similar, but you're right. Like I was in a corporate environment for 15, 20 years, and maybe that is still there. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna try that.
We're also just like insecure a little bit as entrepreneurs, and like we kind of want to like prove to ourselves and to others that like it's like I'm not just at home like watching YouTube videos or something like that. Like I'm just as on top of it as anybody else out there, and we all have this chip on our shoulder, and it can be a bit detrimental.
Yeah, absolutely. Grinding, is I think ingrained very deep, and then shutting that off, I think, is tough. So that kind of leads me into my next question. You mentioned a few times deep work, and so can you kind of explain that and what that is and how to do more of it?
So the basic idea is that your brain needs like 5 or 10 minutes to get into a task and to get productive at it. You have to sort of forget about all the other stuff going on in your life. And I'm sure there's some really complicated science behind it that maybe we don't understand. But if you try it yourself, you'll realize that you become a lot more productive after like 5 or 10 minutes into a task. And this is something that these are tasks that are challenging, like computer programming or writing something really well, or doing some sort of in-depth analysis. This stuff, more or less, that helps your business get to the next level and move forward. And so you need to block off time and not have notifications during that time in order to make progress on those really hard things. And then you also need to give your brain a break from those really hard things. The author, I'm going to misquote him, but I think he says that your average person can really only do about 3 hours of deep work per day. And the guy came up with this book. He's a professor because he just realized that he had figured out a couple of hacks to become way more productive than all of his other colleagues in terms of the number of peer-reviewed papers he was putting out and all these things he was publishing in addition to teaching classes, et cetera. And everybody was blown away. And he was like, well, I just like don't do all the administrative BS all day long when it comes in that you guys do. I actually spend like 3 hours a day, like writing stuff. And if you do that, you can be amazingly productive. So that's the basic thing behind it. He's got a couple of good podcast episodes and maybe a TED Talk out there if you don't want to read the book, but it's really amazing. And I think especially for knowledge workers, with the amount of distractions that we have, focus has become one of the core skills of successful people today.
I've had that book on my shelf for probably a year. It was recommended to me by somebody, and this is a good reminder. I need to pick it up and give it a read, because I think that's something we could all get. Even a 10 or 15% improvement in deep work would be, that'd be huge. So, well, very nice. Well, let's pivot a little bit and talk about Select software reviews. And let me ask you this: who does that platform serve?
Our users are HR and recruiting professionals, mostly in the United States, but globally as well, who buy tools and software. So you could I talked to a company last week that is a 200-person landscaping company in Massachusetts, and they need to buy payroll, they need to buy time and attendance software, they need to buy some recruiting software. And we've got companies like KPMG that use our research to buy things like performance management solutions for lots of different people all over the world, different cultures, different workflows, etc. And so we just do a ton of research on what's going on in the HR tech space, try to write it up to most actionable, useful, unbiased content that we can, so that when you go to buy one of these softwares, you're going to kind of have a cheat code to get to the right vendors and then pay the right price, implement it the right way, capture the ROI, evangelize it, make your boss think you're super smart, and kind of keep growing your organization.
Okay. At what point would, in terms of size, at what point would it make sense for a business owner or the head of an HR department pick up the phone and get in contact with you guys?
So there are people that pick up the phone and get in contact with us, but it's pretty rare. It's like my cell phone's like on the website. So some people find it and call me and they're like, hey, I need help with XYZ. And I'm like, all right, great. Join our community and ask the question. We don't do any consulting. We make money through advertisements. So on our website, we have a bunch of ads from the vendors themselves. So if we pre-select a vendor, we're like, hey, we looked at 300 payroll companies. Here are the 10 we actually recommend. Within those 10, maybe one or two will do an advertising campaign, and that's how we make money. We also will pretty shortly have a marketplace of consultants. So if you want, for example, somebody to help you select the right thing, to implement it, to do whatever, we're going to say, okay, here are 30 people that are really good at XYZ, talk to one of these folks and partner with them. But we don't really work too much directly with companies. We're more of like a media company.
What do you think most HR departments are lacking in terms of software or tools that are out there that can help them?
I think most HR teams are using legacy tools that were sold to them by somebody who was already a vendor for something else. A really good example is there's a lot of payroll companies out there that have really crappy recruiting platforms, employee management platforms, etc. And because you do my payroll, I'm going to buy the recruiting platform from you as well because it's easy and I trust you and we already have that relationship going. I think that the biggest problem with most HR teams is they're not thought of as a strategic asset to the business. They're thought of as a cost center. And many times they act not like a strategic asset. A friend of mine just bought a company and it's a 300 or 400 employee company. They've got a head of HR who makes a decent salary, and really all they do is run payroll every week and just make sure people like sign up for health insurance and stuff like that. They're not thinking about how do we onboard employees to make them educated on our market, on our product, part of the team faster. They're not thinking about how do we tap into different pools of talent, maybe remote workers, maybe people that don't have the resume but have the skills, etc. They're not thinking about all these like strategic things. And so the CEO, my friend in this case, is like, I don't want to task HR with being strategic because they just haven't done it historically, and therefore I don't trust them and they're not bringing good ideas to the table. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that a lot of HR folks would honestly benefit from an MBA program as much as we said, maybe that's not the best thing to do in the first place, but for an entrepreneur at least. But they need to think about the more like analytical sort of business way of thinking to understand how to strategically change their organization versus just executing on the really basic stuff like paying people.
Yeah, I think what you said, like, HR, they're just taking one, kind of plug-in COTS software that they've used for a couple other things and just plugging in all the other modules and not really thinking of like, hey, is this going to be the best module for us in this space? So getting into that, like, review and evaluating software. So on our team, David and I both do that, whenever we're ready for a new software or something. Do you have any tips, like at a high level, of like what we're looking for? If someone's evaluating software, just any kind of a software, just what are you looking for to find a really good software?
Yeah, I think just like the business school example where it's like easy for like McKinsey to trick you into like being an employee, it's easier for a vendor to like kind of trick you into becoming a customer. And so what I like to do before I start to buy anything is just write down like, what's the problem? What am I trying to solve here? What's the ROI? And what do I think might happen from a business perspective as an outcome? And that's a really cool thing to look back on in 6 months to see like, was I right? Was I wrong? kind of learn something about yourself and your decision-making process. What are the key criteria that I really need? And then go out and do a little bit of research on the internet so that you don't spend an hour with the wrong vendor. You can look at it on LinkedIn, like employee growth. You can look at things like Glassdoor reviews. You can look at venture financings. You can look at sort of what the product does. And all these signals, if you do 2 or 3 minutes worth of research on a vendor, you're going to be able to tell a little bit, like, do you want to do it? Do you want to talk to that company or not? There also are obviously a lot of free trials out there. There's a lot of user-generated content on the internet. There's websites like Capter and G2, which are a little bit biased, but a lot of times you'll find like somebody just like you that wrote like, hey, like I've got a podcast and like, here's why I'm using Zencaster, or here's why I'm using Zoom. And like, you can really understand from that person's perspective why or why not that might be good for you. And then of course, actually talking to companies, you should always realize that a lot of the times you can negotiate on price. You can control the conversation by asking the right questions and not just allowing somebody to take you through sort of a pre-formatted script that's designed to get you to one answer at the end of the day. And you can constantly refer back to that original document around what did I actually want to accomplish here versus being sold on maybe, the Mercedes-Benz when you walk into the dealership, like, it's like, oh, all I wanted was like a place to, put my golf clubs and like do a hike on the weekend. I'm going with the CRV. So those are some. Buying software and tools is like really complicated and really hard, and it's different for small companies versus big companies. But those are my quick tips.
I really appreciate it, and yeah, it hits a lot of the boxes. Like, going and doing it just a couple minutes of research on the company like that. That totally makes sense, and it's something that I don't do currently. So I'll be adding that in there. A follow-up funny story on my previous life as an engineer. We had 2 main vendors. We would use 2 or 3, and we went to the best lunches, the best dinners, top golf drinks. Like, they had that marketing piece dialed in, right? But
yeah,
their software was so. Be very wary of that. So awesome. So David and Phil, anything else we want to cover before we get into the fire round?
Nothing on my end. What about you, Phil?
Just on that one point around like the top golf and drinks and all that stuff, it's kind of funny. I'm reading this book called Influence by Cialdini, who's like this psychologist, and the book has been recommended to me a number of different times, but the reason that I really picked it up was I listened to this Charlie Munger speech that he gave at Harvard like back in the 80s, and he cites this book like 7 times. And I found out that they've never met the author, but him and Warren Buffett, they sent the guy a letter, and they actually sent him Berkshire stock because they were like, you've like influenced us so much on like how we think about psychology. Like, we just want you to have some ownership in our company. And I picked up this book, and chapter 2 is about reciprocity, which is essentially like, we are just designed as people. Like, if somebody gives you something, you want to return the favor. Like, it's just such an overwhelming desire. And I'm sure we can all think about how this has influenced our purchasing decision, maybe like a sample at a grocery store, whatever the case may be. You walk into a car dealership, they give you a cup of coffee. These small things like have an actual like huge impact in how we transact. So it's a really good book. I'm only on chapter 3, I'll admit, but it's pretty amazing.
All the stuff behind the curtain is going on that we don't know until we know, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's jump into the fire round, Phil. What is your favorite book?
My favorite book, and this is a bit of recency bias, but it's Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. My favorite book for entrepreneurs, I would say. It's just like, in my opinion, it should be like a class that they teach in high school or something. It's just so amazing how a book written 100 years ago can ring true in everyday life. Probably 50 or 60 times a day, that book can help you out, whether it's dealing with your family or, business or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. What are your hobbies?
Hobbies: golf, yoga, cooking, reading, hiking, anything with the water, swimming, kayaking, stuff like that. And yeah, just always up for like new things that people want to do.
Nice. Very cool. What is the one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
I do not miss the stress that I used to have from having a boss and wanting to please that person, and the migraine headaches that would induce.
Last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I think people that can be their own best coach are usually successful. I think the vast majority of people are capable of building a business. However, you get stuck on the wrong idea, or you let your ego get in the way and you get in a fight with your partner, or there's just like all these like really stupid reasons why people fail. And from an outsider's perspective, it's so obvious why this other person wasn't successful. But from your perspective, it's really hard to see those in yourself. And that's why I spend time meditating and journaling and trying to get feedback from, people on my team or people around me about the things that I'm doing, because I just, I hate the idea of falling into those traps. And I think that people who are successful are either super lucky or they're really good about figuring out where to focus their energy, where to change things.
Okay, excellent. David, you want to close out the show?
Yeah, Phil, how can people get a hold of you?
Sure. So LinkedIn's a really good place to find me. Phil Strazzulla, 2 Z's, 2 L's, Select Software. I've got a blog, philstrazzulla.com, but LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me.
Awesome. And we'll post links to all that in the show notes. Wanted to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, guys.